At the end of 2025, I leaked details that de facto confirmed the existence of, and preparation for, the PS6 Handheld, whose specs I had already leaked months prior. Specifically, the details were twofold. First of all, Sony was directly telling developers at this point, December of last year, that moving forward, their games should be patched to support 8 threads for future devices if needed. Remember, the PS5 has 16 threads, 2 threads per core, and it has 8 cores. So if Sony says your game should really run on 8 threads if it needs to, what they're saying is they will soon have a PlayStation that uses a quad core to run games, not 8 cores. Now, secondly, Sony also started patching power saver mode support all the way back to the PS5's launch SDK, SDK 1.0 from 2020. And they hadn't even bothered to do that for the PS5 Pro. So, and actually on that note, I now want to make it crystal clear what that means and why it's significant, because you need to understand this to fully understand the repercussions of all these bombshells I'm about to leak for PS6 features. So, look, PS5 SDKs are what developers program their games to for compatibility. For example, a game that came out around the PS5's launch might have used SDK 1.0 with their dev kits, but as time goes on, of course, Sony adds new features, optimizes the operating system, optimizes the PS5 for better performance, and they release those optimizations and new features in new SDK updates, SDK 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then developers make a decision. If they are supporting a game that came out years ago, they might go, oh, we really want to directly support these new features, so we're going to have to update to at least whatever SDK to use that new feature or to get that optimization. And some developers do that. But a lot of other developers, they don't bother, right? They say, I think our game runs fine. We can still patch it for new content, but we're not going to patch it for the newest optimization Sony's put into the PlayStation 5 because we don't want to bother having to update our game to a new SDK because, and I'm told this by developers directly that I spoke with over the past couple weeks, that can directly cause bugs, break things, and so you only update SDKs if you really want to, or if you really want those new features from Sony. And by the way, if you want an example of what it looks like when a dev doesn't patch their game to a newer SDK for a newer feature, well, that's why you have these toggles in the PlayStation 5 menu that are like, force VRR on unsupported games. These are games that haven't updated to the newest SDK to directly support VRR, but Sony still thinks it should probably work, and at least in my experience, I've never seen it really break compatibility, and so they force it. But Sony doesn't want to have to force it for power saver mode because there's a lot more changes under the hood for it, and they are genuinely worried that it would break more often than like forcing VRR. So hopefully that makes sense as well. And so you see why this is significant then, right? Sony porting power saver mode support all the way back to the first SDK, but not bothering to do so with the PS5 Pro is Sony basically saying that power saver mode support is more important than PS5 Pro enhanced support because, well, that costs them money and time every time they have to patch an SDK, and they were willing to do it for all 12 of the SDKs last year. Now it's 13. So that means they are really invested in developers supporting power saver mode, and they want it to be in every SDK so that it is pretty much like flipping a switch for a developer to support it. All right, now that I've explained all of that, now that you've eaten your vegetables, let's get to the candy. The new information about PlayStation 6 proving the handheld is 100% happening, that Sony's still doing things in the back end to build support for it early. And I even have more information on PlayStation's answer to Xbox Smart Delivery and a bunch of PS6 features and PSSR updates as well. But first, let's go through some new information I have received regarding proof of the PlayStation 6 handheld. You see, recently, sources of mine provided some updates on how power saver mode is progressing, and it is now just 100% clear that this power mode is a Trojan horse for supporting PS6 handheld backwards compatibility early, right? Let me put this on screen here. Here's a diagram that I recreated from Sony's guidelines to game developers for supporting power saver mode. Now, to be clear, like I said, this is almost one-to-one with a diagram from Sony, but it is something I recreated to avoid them having to sue me again. So yeah, there's some changes in wording and colors, and technically it's a recreation, but anyone who's seen these documents would see this and know exactly where it came from. Anyways, on the left, you can see that This is for how you would thread the cores for PS5 base or PS5 Pro. Remember, Trinity is the codename for PS5 Pro. And yeah, no real surprises here. Look, there's 16 threads. Remember, they start at 0, not 1. So it's 0 to 15. That's 16. 16 threads, and that corresponds to 8 cores because each core runs 2 threads. All right, so a game can use up to 14 threads, although generally they use 13. And then Power Saver mode can use, yep, only 8. And then there's a bunch of unused threads. And in fact, it allots for more than 2 threads for the system. That would mean you would need 2 cores to run those 3 system threads while you're running a game in full screen mode. And then if you switch to minimizing the game, still, devs are required for their game to support low power mode. They are required to still keep the game just running on the 4 cores that are the primary game cores, well then using a little bit of them then to run the system while the game's minimized so it's less sluggish. And they still get access to at least 3 threads in the background as well directly. Guys, this is the exact specs of the PlayStation 6 handheld. 4 Zen 6C, so 8 threads for the game, and then 2 Zen 6 low power cores that go up to 4 threads that can handle those 3 system threads. They would only do this if they were building low power mode as a compatibility layer for the handheld. And I want to explain why that is, by the way, because I'm sure a lot of you are going, but wait a second. I mean, if you use less cores, don't you save energy? And the answer is not really. Like, if you wanted to save energy, what you would actually do is you would make it run at lower clock speeds. Like, instead of like 3.4 gigahertz or whatever, you would limit it to like 2.4 gigahertz, and you would actually still want it to use as many cores as possible. Now, that may sound counterintuitive to people that aren't giant CPU hardware nerds, but I actually think it's quite easy to explain to the layman. So think of cores as maximally efficient the lower they are clocked, not the less you use at once. Like a 16-core CPU on a desktop will actually tend to save more energy running a few tasks at once than if you just had 2 cores, because those 2 cores are running much hotter and harder and burning more energy than just switching tasks to a few cores that can take breaks. Think of it like if you were to try to lift a refrigerator by yourself and you just were struggling like, ugh, and like, yeah, maybe eventually you would if you're crazy strong and you move it somewhere, but was that really more efficient than if you just called 3 of your friends over and all 4 of you lifted it very easily and then just moved at a reasonable pace to get it to where you want it to get to? That's what it's like with cores. Like, you actually expend much more energy making 1 or 2 cores work harder than if you have a bunch of cores work in a more relaxed setting, and thus, this is not programmed to save energy. Sony's trying to tell you it is to hide this, but it's not. This is obviously programmed as a compatibility layer for the PlayStation 6 handheld, and one with the exact specs that I've leaked. But we're not done. There is even more evidence for PS6 support in Sony's answer to Xbox Smart Delivery. It is called PlayGo, and it specifically has new updates in it, clearly to support a PlayStation 6 handheld console. And I'm going to leak those details. Also details about Sony ending PS4 support this year, and new updates for PSSR after an ad from a sponsor. This piece of content is brought to you by the Red Magic 11 Air. And if you're a mobile gamer, you really should hear about this device because this phone is an absolute powerhouse, starting with the cutting-edge Snapdragon 8 Elite processor paired with Red Magic's dedicated Red-Core R4 gaming chip. You're getting clocks up to 4.32 gigahertz for completely smooth, high-quality gameplay without stutters. And to keep your multitasking and games running flawlessly, it packs up to 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM and 512 gigabytes of ultra-fast UFS 4.1 storage. But power is nothing without a great screen to show off that power, which is why the 11 Air also features a gorgeous 6.85-inch 144Hz OLED display with 1800 nits of peak brightness. Plus, with 960 Hz touch sampling rate, your on-screen inputs are registered instantly. And for the competitive players out there, you are going to love the built-in 520 Hz physical shoulder triggers that give you ultra-responsive console-style controls right at your fingertips built into the phone. It looks incredible with a striking transparent design as well. It's lightweight, it has customizable RGB, and it has Red Magic Ice cooling system built right in with 24,000 4,000 RPM high-speed turbofan if you need it, and a massive vapor chamber and high-efficiency graphene layers to keep your phone icy cold during long sessions, which, speaking of long sessions, the 11 Air is loaded with a massive 7,000 milliamp hour battery. Oh, and when you do need to juice it up, it has an 80-watt fast charger that gets you back in the action incredibly fast. It even features charge separation technology, so you can plug it in while playing and power goes straight to the motherboard to reduce heat and protect your battery's lifespan. This is like gaming laptop technology built into a phone. And to top it all off, you get rich immersive audio with dual high-performance speakers and precise 4D haptic feedback for a truly immersive experience. So this really isn't just a phone, it's a professional hardcore gaming setup in your pocket. Check out the Red Magic 11 Air below through the link in the description. And remember, clicking on that link helps out the channel a ton, but getting the phone through that link helps out Moore's Law is Dead even more. So support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out the Red Magic 11 Air today. All right, now let's move on to PlayGo, what is now basically PlayStation's equivalent to Xbox Smart Delivery after an update with SDK 13. Apparently that came out a couple weeks ago to developers. Again, SDK 1 was like the launch PS5 SDK. SDK 13 is the current and newest one for developers that basically adds Sony's Smart Delivery. So if I put this quote on screen here from one of my longest running sources, this person told me that I should know that we, and this person works at Sony, updated PlayGo with SDK 13. Basically, it is now our version of Xbox's Smart Delivery, and it allows for devs to organize chunks of differing assets and textures for each PlayStation console so that a given console only downloads the exact files it will use. Up until now, developers would have to include everything a PS5 Pro's would need with higher resolution textures and higher detail assets in every PS5 download, regardless of if the console downloading it was a Pro or not, but no longer. Devs can now specify downloads for PS4 plus PS4 Pro. It can't distinguish between PS4 and PS4 Pro. It's just one standard PS4 package still because their software is just older or something. But anyways, you can specify for the PS4 consoles, for PS5, for PS5 Pro, and also for PS5 Power Saver mode. I'm not kidding, people. I've seen it, the documents myself. It's true. Yes, Power Saver mode is getting its own asset in texture packaging like it's its own console. Like this source points out, this would only be done if this mode was going to be the entire basis of a new console that might need its own tweaks. You save no energy by using smaller textures on the PS5. Clearly, this is building compatibility for the handheld. And so there you go. Not only is Power Saver mode getting programmed like it's for a handheld based on the specs that I've leaked for the handheld, it's actually getting its own bespoke asset and texture Smart Delivery support. But I'm still not done. Another source a week ago shared with me this update from Sony that they sent out to game devs regarding the sunsetting of PS4 software support. Let me throw this quote on screen. And to be clear, this isn't me quoting a source, this is me quoting an update Sony sent to game developers recently. But anyways, what Sony told game devs is that they want to share an important update regarding PlayStation Network or PSN services for the new PS4 title submissions. And yes, by the way, I'm aware that Sony isn't using PSN publicly anymore. Behind the scenes, it's still over a bunch of documents, so I'm aware. But anyways, Sony said that starting in spring of 2026, legacy PSN services will be sunset for new PS4 submissions. This means that any new PS4 title submitted after this date will no longer be able to integrate with the following legacy services. Activity feeds, there's NP in-game messaging, peer-to-peer communication, NP singling. I'm not going to read all of these. I just included them so that if someone did follow actual game development and wanted to know, this is what they said. But the important point is they're just sunsetting a boatload of PS4 services. And Sony says that for people to future-proof their projects that are still on PS4, that they should adopt the new cross-gen SDK, which offers access to newer, more robust PSN services. These services, and this is the important part, are designed to provide a more unified and scalable foundation across console generations. And Sony appreciates your continued partnership and collaboration as we evolve our services to deliver the best experience for players and developers alike. We will provide more detailed dates and timing for this change as we get closer to transition. So there it is. They're directly saying a transition is coming soon and that they're preparing legacy games for scaling across and having a foundation for future console generations. And just to be clear, what Sony is saying is they're not saying that PS4 games aren't going to work after 2026. They're just saying that for PS4 games to continue to function optimally, they need to be patched to referencing PS5's cross-gen network features. The legacy stuff is going away. Sony wants everything unified so they can scale a new foundation for future console generations. And to be clear, devs I consulted with last week about this believe there will likely be a translation layer or fallback for unpatched PS4 games, but they're probably not going to run very well, or at least not as well as if they were to patch their games directly for PS4 to PS5 cross-gen SDK. And, frankly, who knows? I mean, Sony might push some forced compatibility thing and some update, but I will say this, by 2027, the PS4 will be 14 years old. Any game that's not patched for the latest SDK, I'm just communicating what I've gathered talking to developers. They say that basically, if a game dev didn't patch their game with what Sony's putting out there to prepare for next gen, that the game probably is single player only and not being supported anymore by the game dev anyways. And so it probably won't need optimal network features to continue to function because it doesn't really need any new network stuff. It's just going to run as a single player game. But anyways, let me start concluding the video. The point of everything I put out today, multiple leaks from multiple sources, all of it leads to one unified narrative. The PS6 is not many years away. It is clearly right around the corner. Basically, everything Sony's working on right now in the background seems to somehow be connected to the PlayStation 6 and especially the PlayStation 6 Handheld, making sure games are ready to support it, that the transition is smooth, and doing that not just so that you want to buy the PS6, but so that you maybe get rid of a PS4 if that's what you're still gaming on as well. As a major objective, it's also obvious to me of next gen is to finally get the remaining PS4 gamers to upgrade, which brings me to pricing. Now look, 90% of this video was actually written about a week ago, and that means it was written before I saw the PS5 price increases. And so this is in addition to the video script that I did last minute, which I'll say this about the PS5 price increases. Honestly, they don't surprise me that much. They are now in line with where the Xbox is and where the Xbox has been for many months, and it follows dozens of things that would have pushed Sony to realize prices are just going up and they can't avoid it. And so all I can say is that if you don't need to get a PS5, like if you're happy with your PS4 games or you're a PC gamer or something, you're thinking of getting one maybe at some point, I would say after seeing these rather large price increases to the PS5 and PS5 Pro that you should probably just wait for next gen, because I made it obvious today, right? Next gen is clearly right around the corner. And like I've covered in previous leaks about the PS6, which check those out if you haven't watched them yet, these things are going to be designed to be efficiently priced. I actually explained this in a ton of detail in a die shrink that also came out today. You get access to it if you join the Patreon just at the $2 tier. So please do that if you want the full long explanation. But the point is, again, they're going to design the next gen. I've seen it in documentation from the ground up to be cheap to produce. They're not going to design it to be giant like the PS3 or PS5 to dominate living rooms, to dominate conversations. They are designing it to every little screw in there, the way they do the motherboard, the size of it to save money on shipping. They're designing it to be cheaper to make than the existing consoles, meaning that I do still believe that the PS6 base console will be cheaper than the PS5 Pro, and that if they do launch a PS6S, that is to say a budget console that uses the handheld APU but isn't a handheld, I do think that will be priced lower than the PS5 base is right now, or at least it can be. Like, I've run the numbers again. It would be cheaper to produce, vastly smaller size, vastly cheaper cooling, vastly cheaper power supply. The RAM really probably won't be much more. If not, it might even be less than what the RAM would cost to put into a base PS5. And so if you can wait, with all of what's going on right now in the world, raising prices, including prices of the PS5, and then seeing that it also seems like memory prices might already be collapsing and thus will be better next year, I just think the PS6 is something you should just wait for if you haven't already bought a PS5 for the most part. Now, obviously, that's easy for me to say. I already have one. Maybe someone's been waiting to get a PS5 Pro to play GTA 6. I don't know. If you really need one to do that, I guess do it. But I will say, if you just wait 1 year after when like GTA 6 comes out, if it does come out at the end of this year, you'll already have a PS6 that will run it better probably anyways, and you'll spend less money on it. So if the money really matters to you that much, just wait for next gen. Don't pay these overpriced prices for like the PS5, or at least overpriced relative to what you could pay a year later. All right, and that's going to do it for this video, except actually before I go, I do have one minor thing I want to update you on when it comes to PSSR support. I've seen a lot of people confused about PSSR 2 having its version frozen on PS5 Pro, and I want to clear that up. So, first of all, I was just informed that Sony is actually porting PSSR 2 support directly all the way back to SDK 9. That was the SDK when the PS5 Pro launched. Up until now, they wanted devs to use one of the newer ones. They are going back on that decision and actually making it easier, therefore, for devs to directly add PSSR 2 support into their game. And they're only freezing, actually, the forced toggle, the toggle you use to force PSSR 1 to use the base PSSR 2. Does that make sense? I've seen a lot of people say that Sony's freezing PSSR 2 in general, and they're not. They're freezing the toggle version because that one they guarantee runs efficiently, and future versions of PSSR might require the dev to do a bit more work to make sure it runs optimally, and they don't want that to be in the base toggle because that could make some games actually perform worse in some ways for people. But because, like I just said, they're actually patching PSSR 2 all the way back to SDK 9, they're making it very easy for devs to support PSSR 2. And so the point is, no, like any game that has PSSR 1 right now can get to PSSR 2, 2.53, whatever comes to the PS5 Pro in the future, and they can easily do it now because they've patched prior SDKs that had PSSR 1 support. But they're going to expect the dev to directly do it because that means if they patch it themselves, they can get access to the newest thing, and they don't want to force that with a toggle. So does that make sense? I just wanted to clear that up before I end this video. But yeah, now I have ended it. Please make sure that you subscribe to Moore's Law is Dead on YouTube. Ring the bell button, like the video, share the video, comment down below. I'm actually very curious what you guys think about this now. Complete proof the PS6 handheld is coming. And then also, like I said before, please consider supporting Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. If you do at even the base level, you'll be able to ask us questions. We have a lot of cool upcoming guests. Mystic Ryan is on the roster to come on soon. Colin Moriarty from Sacred Symbols is on the roster. Of course, we'll be having other people too to come on to talk about things about NVIDIA and AMD as well. Just the lowest $1 tier lets you ask us questions, gets access to dozens of Essential Die Shrink episodes. $2 tier gets you access to the newest one that just came out, and the hundreds of Die Shrink episodes, and a Discord where you can discuss all of this with me and thousands of other supporters on the Discord. I'd love to talk to you about this directly. And I'd also love to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video one more time, Red Magic and their Red Magic 11 Air gaming phone. But for everybody else, I will say this though, no matter what, if you made it this far into this video, thank you for watching.